Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here. And boy, oh boy, do we live in the weirdest, just most confusing, most obfuscating times, I think, in recent history. Because there's so much to this now public Bill Gates-Donnie Trump feud. You see, I was wondering when Big Don was going to pull the trigger on Gates. For the most part, you haven't heard anything negative about Bill Gates from Donald Trump. But finally, after Bill Gates did this extremely Orwellian interview with Chris Wallace, of course, on Fox News, you know, the station that's supposed to be promoting everything Donald Trump is doing, but not doing that at all at this point. You know, there's only a few select people that are really pushing Trump on that network. And this isn't a MAGA commercial. This isn't an I love Donald Trump deal. I mean, the guy in the same breath the other day in Minnesota said we were going to the moon and Mars again. We're not just going to the moon. We're going to Mars. And I'm like, oh my God. This nonsense. I mean, the lies are coming at you from every single angle. But what we're going to do here is we're going to have to play the entire Chris Wallace interview because it is so much bigger and more important than even this feud that's now publicly starting. So last night, I watched the Chris Wallace interview that we're going to go over, and it's unbelievable. Number one, Gates sits there and postulates that they have lost decades now, decades of his Good Samaritan work for the whole world because of the coronavirus. It's all the coronavirus's fault. What? Decades? So you didn't build any infrastructure to help these people. Okay? Literally, he says this. Then in the same breath, says that the travel ban on China, which like everybody on every political spectrum at this point at least has to concede and say it was a good thing or he should have taken action sooner or all that, is now not good enough and actually caused the spread of the virus. Even Chris Wallace asks him again whether he just said that, but he doesn't challenge him on it. He just lets him say it again and describe Johnny nonsense. So that's what Trump responds to, but we'll get there in a minute. Because that's not even the most egregious thing Gates does in this interview. He actually starts talking about eradicating polio. Okay? Remember, it's settled science with vaccines, and polio's been eradicated. Not in third world countries for some reason. It's so weird that maybe, I don't know, regular food, nutrients, and running water are more important than your vaccines, Bill Gates. But let's not ever talk about that. Says that the reason there's a polio outbreak out there because not enough people are taking it. In the same breath, when even the corrupt UN organization admits an outbreak in Sudan, and even this is a managed article, because if you read it, it's Nigeria, it's the Congo, okay? It talks about leaking into parts of Eurasia. And in the same breath, look, Angola, Congo, Nigeria, Zambia. All right? So if you think that, I mean, he lost decades because of the coronavirus. Meanwhile, this guy tells him that he's the best. Oh, you've done so much for us. It's unbelievable. So you look at this, and they admit the oral vaccine is spreading it, but they're still trying to get you. See, here's Afghanistan and Pakistan. It's endemic. So wait a minute. Polio's not eradicated? Because I keep hearing that. It's 2020. All right, so now we're going to get to Trump's response in a moment. But before we go any further, I want to remind everybody, we're fully demonetized here. You're not supposed to hear what I have to say or any person with a brain has to say about our new dark overlord, Bill Gates. But unfortunately, I've been talking about him for well over a decade, warning people about this guy. A monster in a pink sweater. That's what he is. So if you want to support independent media, you want to support truth, you don't want to support Chris Wallace and these softballs and this propaganda fluff piece, $5, $10, $15, it means the world to me. Big donors, thank you so much for supporting me as well. All the documentary films, guys, they're free in the playlist section. Make sure you're giving it a thumbs up, you're subscribing, you're sharing. Tomorrow at noon, we do the exclusive over at Rockfin live. Go make the free account. If you do a premium account, you get every creator. It's like a Netflix for creators. Great. But at least go make the free account now, because if they kick me off this platform, that's where I'm going to be. 100%. We're going to do a lot more regardless when I get out to Iowa. So, what did the Trumpster have to say? So he's on Fox and Friends this morning. And I was out getting my coffee. I was, actually talking about this with my buddy. I was like, I couldn't believe that this guy got on television. And I was actually showing him the article that I just showed you. And all of a sudden I hear that Trump is actually on Fox and Friends, and they ask him the Gates question. And then they actually play him the China clip. And finally, Trump is just like, Gates, Gates, Gates. Well, I'll tell you what. He finally said that, this is going to be the new Democratic talking point. He finally acknowledged that the guy has been attacking him, basically. He talked about how they're pro-vaccine, but now they're anti-vaccine when he wants to get it out there. So I predict in the next week or so, Trump's gloves are going to come off when it comes to Bill Gates. And they should. They should have, listen, they should have been off with Bill Gates 3 months ago. All right? Seriously. When we started getting into May and June across the country, okay, and it was very evident that they were allowing these protests, right? I guess you would have to say late June, mid-June is when the protests, I don't quote me on that, but right around there, and there were no outbreaks. And they still promoted and promoted and promoted. So, you know what? Let's do it. We do it live. Thumbs it up, subscribe, and share. This is a long one, guys, but we have to play the whole thing because it's just such propaganda.
For 20 years, the Gates Foundation has led the fight against poverty and disease in the developing world. Each year, they detail the strides they've made.
Think about that. Decades. They poverty in the whole world. Really? Really? Is that right? Then how in the world are these things still happening? And I mean, Chris Wallace, you may want to go kiss him on the neck. You like him so much. The way he talks about it. I'm just saying.
But not in this year of the pandemic. Earlier, I sat down with Bill Gates to discuss the terrible impact of COVID-19 and to get his assessment of how the U.S. has handled it.
Oh.
Bill, welcome back. Each September, you release what you call your Goalkeepers Report, giving what progress has been achieved on your main goals of fighting poverty and trying to improve public health.
Poverty, public health. Oh, Mr. Gates, thank you. You're number one. Look how happy he is. Why is this guy allowed to have such a smug face, an authoritarian attitude with almost no pushback from anybody? I'm not on his payroll. I don't work for somebody who's on his payroll of one of his NGOs. I don't get any kind of Gates grants. I don't want them. I'm free to speak the truth. And Chris Wallace is selling out humanity in this interview.
Developing countries, but the news this year is that there hasn't been progress. Things are worse, not better. How much worse?
Because of the pandemic, we've had huge setbacks, in some cases erasing literally decades of progress.
Erasing decades of progress. 6 months, 9 months. He's also going to admit here, by the way, that African countries weren't hit as hard. And let me tell you why they weren't hit as hard. Number one, they're already skeptical of this fucking monster. And number two, because of all the malaria there, I don't know, guess, just take a wild guess in places like Uganda that had less than 20 deaths, okay, of the whole thing, less than 20 deaths. And we're going to do it live so I can show you that. I don't want to just say it. They had hydroxychloroquine out there. Not saying it works. Just acknowledging that they have it. And because we do it live, and again, thumbs this up, subscribe and share, let's do it. Uganda, okay, COVID deaths. Let's see what the numbers are. I'm sorry, that was May. They've had 60 deaths. and 5,000 total cases. I misspoke. I'm sorry. Those were May's numbers. That's updated. So there you go, 60 whole deaths. But let's hear what Mr. Gates has to say. We've wiped it out. All this progress and all these tens and hundreds of billions of dollars over the years that my benevolent ass has given is done because of this. Okay.
And so it really underscores that we've got to bring this pandemic to an end, not just in a few rich countries, but the entire world. And then we'll have to take special efforts to build back, so we're back on that positive track that we normally this time of year are getting to talk about, and thank the voters for their generosity with the foreign aid that plays a key role in all that progress.
Look, he's just so happy. Think about that. Special efforts. What are these special efforts going to be, Bill?
How has COVID reversed what's been a 20-year streak of progress in places like Africa? For instance, how has COVID caused such a dramatic increase in extreme poverty in developing countries?
Well, what he's not going to tell you is we intentionally cut off a lot of the supply lines because of this, and poor nations became even more desperate for certain things. And since we shut a lot of things down, even though 60 deaths in Uganda, and he's going to talk about how they did better than other nations. Like, it's the wildest thing. But he won't acknowledge what actually happened. And again, they're going to tell you 20 years of progress. If you built the proper infrastructure over the last 20 years, no matter what, these 6 months could not have been that devastating. My bullshit meter is off the roof.
Yeah, so the actual death toll in the poorest countries, including most of Africa, has actually not been super high. The population is very young, and other than South Africa, the numbers have been less than was forecast. Sadly, though, the fragility of their health system, that people can't go out and get the vaccines, children are.
See how he spins it? They can't get the vaccines. It's all about my vaccine. Never wants to talk about the therapeutics available. Can't even talk like that might have been maybe why there wasn't hysteria or death there on the mass level we've seen everywhere else. It's so weird.
Risk of diarrhea and malaria. And so both the vaccination rates have gone down by over 14%, which takes us back in time over 2 decades. And that
did you just hear what he just said? And let's be very clear about this. He just tried to tell you, because vaccination rates in that country were down 14%. That contributed to 20 years of reversal of health in those nations. What are they going to tell you for his mandatory vaccine? Not whatever Trump's putting out there, and I don't like Operation Warp Speed, and I don't like him playing the game. We've done the videos on it, right? It's not going to be safe. It's not going to be effective, in my opinion. Okay? I think he's lying when he says that. See, if you're a Democrat, you can actually say that. But at the same time, it will be no less effective or no less safe than whatever they're trying to give you. And he's telling you that by not taking it in a third world nation, it went back 20 years. So to put that in perspective in the United States with the fear of COVID, right? They'll just bring it back where it's like we were here 2 years ago when it began. Because he wants lockdown till the end of 2021, top of 2022. When are we putting him in prison? This is ridiculous. And again, he's talking about vaccination rates, and it's incredible. But this story that shows there's huge outbreaks because of the oral vaccine throughout parts of Africa. Gee, I wonder why they don't want to take it, Bill. They still are trying to push you to take it. like they still want, some of the campaign have recently been restarted, but health workers need to vaccinate more than 90% of children in their efforts to eradicate the paralytic disease. So in the same breath, they tell you that it's paralyzing kids. All right? It's literally. They talk about it. Right here. Ethiopia and I'll butcher that, so I'm not even going to say it. Were paralyzed in March and April. Wow. I mean, you want to talk about 1984, baby. You want to talk about Orwell? We're living it. And this guy might as well be the Big Brother poster.
Extreme poverty, which is another one that had been going down constantly, has gone up. So they have 37 million people back in extreme poverty. And so the breadth of the negative impacts, mental health, education, economic, and other health things, not...
And you notice, like, now he's actually talking only in, like, the third world nations about the mental impact, about the economic impact, about the other health impacts. We don't get to talk about that in the United States as a United States problem. But when we're talking about the third world and undoing 20 years of progress because of his own benevolent ass, his own foundation, oh, now we talk about it. You see how this works? You wonder why I'm talking Orwell. Oh, my goodness.
Just COVID directly are much greater than I expected before we started to pull the report together.
Now, the Gates Foundation has committed $650 million to fight COVID, which is the biggest contribution by any independent foundation. Where is that money going, and what success have you had?
We have some very high-scale diagnostic things coming online, but the biggest area has been in the vaccine, where helping seed some R&D money very quickly.
So let me just make this clear. None of it's going to therapeutics. We're talking about testing. And don't think that testing doesn't involve everybody eventually. Okay? And then we're going to invest in the vaccine. And by the way, have you noticed that they cut this up? It's highly edited. You know, the way they're cutting, Chris Wallace. They never presented it as live. But this is actually what they want you to see. That's the most incredible thing. So this guy gives over $500 million through his, tax-free foundation that's set up really, again, as a tax haven, a way to launder money in most cases, and then have to have corrupt influence on your billions and billions and billions of dollars, your empire. That's the reality. And this guy's acting like he's your hero because he's putting together $500 million towards testing and the vaccines he wants you to take and make a profit on. Come on.
For the best vaccine approaches, and then making sure that when we get a vaccine, it's not just for the rich countries, that we take factories of many companies, including high volume manufacturers, some of which are in India, bring them in, which is completely novel, and as soon as something's approved, we get going so that the pandemic isn't just constantly coming back to the...
It's just not constantly ricochet. That was the word from Andrew Capo Cuomo. Seriously. That ricochet just doesn't keep coming back. What multiverse nightmare have I entered where some pandemic that by the best numbers of your corrupt World Health Organization that I have to bow down to of a 0.6% death rate, that's not the whole nation, all right? That's people who are infected that we know about that go to the hospital. That it's going to keep bouncing around and my life has to be on hold because of this guy. And people like him.
United States. So vaccine has been the biggest part. And of course, we're going to give more. By the time we get this all organized, I'm sure we'll be well over $1 billion.
Well over $1 billion. Look how happy he is. Look at this smug asshole. Again, I'm not riding a Trump train here, but you need to call him out even more. Again, Trump's administration has come out and said that this thing will, of course, not be mandatory. And again, when he was talking today, he said, vaccine or no vaccine, we're turning the corner on this thing. Well, it's going to depend on what states you're living in and what happens in this very corrupt election that's coming on right now. Yesterday, just so you understand, Joe Biden said it again. He said on television, and no one's calling him out on it, nobody's touching it, that 200 million people were going to be dead from COVID by the time he was done with his speech. Where are the headlines? And you know what? We're going to save that as the bonus video after this. How's that for you? We're going to save that as the bonus video So you can watch him say that. So I'm just not spouting off at the mouth, because that's the truth. That's the Orwellian nightmare that we live in. And the facade of journalists and the news right now is a sad joke.
You have put a lot of the money into what you call the COVID-19 therapeutics accelerator. Where do we stand on a vaccine, which of course everybody is waiting for? There's a lot of talk about but
that's the ironic part. He talks about it being the therapeutics accelerator, and it's all vaccine. It's not therapeutics, right? He just flips it on his head, because most people in their mind are so dumbed down, they just assume they're the same thing.
The end of this year, is that realistic?
The R&D is going at full speed. You know, even the companies that have offered to do it on a break-even basis, if it wasn't for that donated money, they wouldn't be able to do that. So that's helped a lot. The place the U.S. has not shown up is in this issue of helping to buy the vaccine for these developing countries. And we're hoping, you know, if there was going to be a supplemental bill, there was a chance the $4 billion for the vaccines would have been in there. Now that vehicle doesn't look like it'll.
Sure, let's let the taxpayers let you make a profit on vaccines you want to give the world that we in this country don't even really want. And remember, when the FDA approves one of his vaccines that he says is awesome sauce, it's not going to be, oh, we're going to recommend it. Trust me.
Come to fruition, you know, so maybe the continuing resolution, you know, we're hoping to get that organized. I believe that by early next year, you know, of the 6 leading vaccines, the ones that are furthest along in the West, that probably 3 or 4 of those will show efficacy and safety. And that's when the challenge will be, okay, how do you allocate it? The way to answer that challenge is just to get so much volume that you're not having to.
Listen, what I need you to do is produce a fuck ton before we even make the people take it. And then we'll make the people take it. And remember, he's talking about the efficacy and the safety of these things. Now, in the beginning, when he trusted the FDA, he was putting it all on them as plausible denial. I trust that the FDA is going to do their job. But remember, he's talking about the end of 2021. I mean, I don't understand what people don't get. That this is the guy they're putting on television all the time. This is the guy who's supposedly so benevolent and given money to all these poor people and stopped poverty over the years, and nobody on television has called him out on it. And the first whispers of some pushback from, the president were just this morning. And I'll tell you what, sir, I'm not your biggest fan. You did crush it the other night with my Biden Wendy's line. Good for you. Good for you. I don't want mandatory masks. I don't want mandatory vaccines. I need you to push back harder. I need you to talk about how this guy's a criminal. All right? I get it. You couldn't even lock her up. That's the problem. He couldn't lock her up. There was no locking Hillary Clinton up. Do you think this guy is, less untouchable than Hillary and Bill Clinton? Get the F out of here.
Make really terrible trade-offs. We show in the report that if you distribute equitably, you have half as many deaths than if you just give to only to the rich.
Oh, yeah.
When do you see anything?
By the way, there's no evidence of that. He just made that up. First of all, think about what he said earlier. Half as many deaths if you only give it to the rich. Think about that. He just said, right? He just said that the poorest countries haven't even been that affected from this. We showed you the Uganda numbers of 60 people dead in that country, right? But he's saying, well, how does that work? Again, I did a video earlier this week. Bill Gates gets to say whatever he wants, and more is coming.
Close to a return to normal in the U.S. and what you call the rich world, and when do you see a return to normal around the rest of the globe in developing countries?
Yeah, if the vaccine approvals come by early next year, as I expect, then by next summer, the U.S. will be starting to go back to normal, and by the end of the year.
Next summer. starting to go back to normal. Did you hear them? Are you listening? Are you listening? And remember when it was 15 days to stop the spread, right? Just hunker down for 2 weeks, right? Then it was flatten the curve, right? Now he's telling you, he's been laying it out for a while.
Our activities can be fairly normal if we're also helping these other countries. The end of the epidemic, best case, is probably 2022, but during 2021, the numbers, we should be able to drive them down if we take the global approach. So, thank goodness vaccine technology was there, that the funding came up, that the companies put their best people on it. That's why I'm optimistic this won't last indefinitely.
You say that ever since you were a teenager, you've tackled a new problem the same way. You ask who is handling it well and what can you learn from them. So, direct question, how well has the U.S. handled the coronavirus?
So who's handling it well? Certainly not the United States. And we're not, because we're locked down. Sweden, there's not a breath about that. Don't worry about it. Now look at this. Again, he can't stop smiling. I feel like if you cryo-froze somebody who was like a big movie aficionado from the 1970s and 80s, we cryo-froze him at like 1990, and we woke him up, okay? And then we don't even tell him, it's Bill Gates, because Bill Gates a little bit more known in 1990, not huge, right? But we just start playing clips of this. He's like, what supervillain movie is this? I mean, with the pandemic, this guy is really evil. Take a look. My God. Thumbs it up, subscribe, and share as we keep going.
Well, unfortunately, we did a very poor job, and you can just see that in the numbers if you compare the Asian countries like South Korea and Australia. The key...
Notice how he mentions Australia after the Asian countries. You know why he's mentioning that? Because they're ripping people out of their homes for posting about lockdown protests. Social media. That's the only reason, because they've done authoritarian things. That's it. Numbers have nothing to do with this guy. He doesn't care about that. Okay?
He was getting the testing going. What happened was that 40,000 people came out of China because we didn't ban the residents and citizens from coming in. So we created this rush, and we didn't have the ability to test or quarantine those people. And so that seeded the disease here. The ban probably accelerated that.
The ban probably accelerated that. So what this guy is telling you is he wanted to either leave or immediately quarantine 40,000 U.S. citizens in the January time space for living in China. And instead we allowed them to come back. And by the way, we don't know how this thing was seeded. I'm not taking any Wuhan lab or, U.S. bioweapon approach, only that a lot of the evidence seems to be that this is a lab-created thing, and those are the narratives that are being put out. But I've told you what I think. I think whatever it was, COVID-19, and it could be many things, was here in New York November latest last year. That's the truth of the matter. And no one wants to talk about that narrative. But now he's telling you that, think about what he's telling you. Not only did the China ban accelerate it, but we should have treated our own citizens basically the way China treated theirs.
The way it was executed. And we just didn't go to the commercial providers and get the tests ready. The FDA made it harder. And so even today, people don't get their results in 24 hours, which it's outrageous that we still have that.
What's outrageous is that in my small community, max population 14,000, is that we had 850 plus confirmed cases, and eventually somebody in my county, they said, went to the hospital and would not reveal their age or what kind of pre-existing conditions. And I have no idea what's going on in this person. But forget about, again, fatalities from almost 1/15th minimum of the population. 1 out of 15 people here has it. And 1 hospitalization, 0 deaths. And the 1 hospitalization they won't even account for, whether it's real or not. But we're locking our society down? I'm in New York, the hotbed. My God.
I want to pick up on that. You're saying that the travel bans made the situation worse, not better?
Yeah, so when you have people realize that the flights are going to start to get canceled, and if they don't, the citizens and residents, if they don't come back right away, you get a rush. And that's where you really need to do like South Korea, Australia did, where you take those people and you
take those people and you do whatever I say with them. You put them in hotels, you put them in buildings, you don't let them see their families. You treat them like pieces of meat that you can dispose of.
Test them, and if you can't test them, you put them in quarantine. If they test positive, you put them in quarantine. We didn't do that. We didn't have any community testing. We didn't have the scale of testing, which would have required the commercial providers. And so that meant that March saw this incredible explosion, the West Coast coming from China, and then the East Coast coming out of Europe. And so even though we'd seen China and we'd seen Europe, that testing capacity and clear message of how to behave wasn't there.
How to behave?
And that's, led to us having not just a bad spring, we've had a pretty tough summer.
No, we haven't. No, we haven't. No, we haven't. Your propaganda and lies have tried to say that Sturgis caused some crazy outbreak. Where are the deaths? Where are the hospitalizations? It's crazy, these narratives they can run with, right? Even the outbreak in my town, in Oneonta. Google it. Everybody will say it's from the bars and kids at college parties. They didn't test them before they came. So you have no idea how much it spread. You can't say, oh, we let 500 kids in with COVID, and then we had 800 positives in the school or 700 positives. You can't even say that. You can't say you had 10 and then it spread. You didn't test them on purpose because you're selling a narrative of bullshit. That's why. And this guy's the pied mother truckin' piper of it.
And sadly, because of the seasonality, until we get these new tools, the fall's looking to shape up as pretty tough as well. I do think, we need to own up to the fact that we didn't do a good job. Part of the reluctance, I think, to fix the testing system now is that nobody wants to admit that it's still outrageous that the access to the test is depending on the more wealthy get access. And
he's always trying to make it a class thing, right? The more wealthy get access, keeps referring to wealthier nations, right? This guy right here in front of you, he looks at the wealthier nations or the people that he wants you to identify with, the 100,000 people, the millionaires, right? He doesn't give a fuck about them. He doesn't care about any of them. He tries to make it into like a scarcity argument. It's ridiculous.
You have these delays where you're not seeing the answer within 24 hours, which that should not be the case. The U.S. has more of these machines, more of this capacity than other countries by a huge amount. And so partly the reimbursement system is creating perverse incentive. But, looking back, my main focus now is let's get the tools right and let's get the testing right now. We will have time to look at those mistakes, which in February and March were really super unfortunate. But, we can't pretend like we get a good grade even today.
This man is a criminal. He needs to be tried for his crimes, period. They need to take away all of his funding. They need to take away any kind of protection and status he has with his Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Take your foundation and go elsewhere. Go to Canada with it. So get it out of the United States completely. I want nothing to do with it. Go bring it to a Commonwealth. Go have it in China, Bill. You seem to love them. You seem to love how Asia handled this.
Finally, I want to end where we started. You talk about the fact that as a result of COVID, the efforts that you make, that other people make in the developing world, and that you've been involved in for decades to fight malaria and polio and HIV and poverty, have been set back for years, that you've lost years of progress that you had so painstakingly made.
You hear this? You hear this propaganda? Again, he's going to blame the fact that shit is still so effed up in every place he's supposedly given to and done, and now reversed all the good he's done. When in the same breath, he admitted that there was barely any COVID in these poor nations. And we just showed you the Uganda numbers. 60 deaths the entire country. And then, while we're sitting here and he's talking polio, I want to remind everybody again that even this headline is extremely deceptive. UN, okay, again, UN says new polio outbreak in Sudan caused by oral vaccine. But it's not just the Sudan. I want to say it again. It's big time in Africa because of this guy. Angola, Congo, Nigeria, Zambia. And then you look at the Middle East, Afghanistan and Pakistan are mentioned. And they say they need more vaccines in the same breath of telling you they paralyze children. Chris Wallace isn't going to talk about the paralyzed kids. I promise you that. And the only reason I'm even able to do it is because I'm reading it from the Associated Press. And the UN, hey, the UN is the World Health Organization. And then you say, well, Jason, how does that sneak out? It's like a lot of people in the United Nations on the lower levels think they're doing good things. They don't understand they're a mechanism of the predator class of globalism, of tyranny. They have no clue. So some of them report on this and it gets out there and it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But then the journalists do their job and they underplay it and they spin it and they go full George Orwell with it.
How long is it going to take for the developing world to get back to where they were just at the start of 2020? And on a personal level, how frustrating is that for you?
Well, I'm always optimistic. We will get back on track and we'll get on those positive trends. But a good example is polio. Polio, which Rotary has been behind that eradication from the beginning. And before the pandemic, we're down to these two countries.
Eradication, down to these two countries. Okay. I just showed you that. But again, you can't, again, that's never going to be mentioned here. Instead, he gets to propagate his lies.
It's been just this huge setback. And, the partners in this that include CDC, WHO, figuring out, are we going to be able to work together and stay committed against this eradication?
Eradication. I keep hearing eradication. It's settled science. And by the way, someone in the comment section, I just noticed that Rotary, that's the Rotary Club. All right. And basically, they've been intricate in doing these vaccines in the United States especially.
I'd say there's a lot of uncertainty about that. I want to redouble our efforts, and even though it'll get delayed, get polio done. So yes, it's a little frustrating. The pandemic, if that hadn't come, we'd be so much further along. We did get Africa declared free of wild polio, so there's a little bit of progress. But if we pay attention to the poor countries, which, we're a little self-centered right now. But if we do, I think that eradication will really energize people and energize all this global health work.
Bill Gates, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks so much. Hopefully next time, better news to discuss.
Great. Thanks, Chris.
Yep, he cares so much. Again, Bill Gates. We love Bill Gates. He's just the best. And Chris Wallace, you've been a piece of trash for some time. Everybody knows you're a piece of trash. But that, was simply shameful. Okay? So now, let's see. I think it's right around the 9-minute mark for old Zombie Joe here. I told you if you stuck around, we'd have the bonus for you of Joey B. It's not even Joey B. He had his moments yesterday. He seemed pretty lucid for Joe Biden. But at the same time, he stumbled. Forget about that. He said again that by the time this speech is done, 200 million people will have died from COVID. So maybe we give it a little bit of context here. 8:30. Yeah, we'll start at 8:30. Okay.
More than 100 million Americans with pre-existing conditions. If it succeeds, insurers could once again discriminate or drop coverage completely for people living with pre-existing conditions like asthma, diabetes, cancer, and so many other problems. And perhaps, most cruelly of all, if Donald Trump has his way, the complications from COVID-19, which are well beyond what they should be.
Sure.
It's estimated that 200 million people have died, probably by the time I finish this talk.
What was that, Joe? 200 million
The
people.
complications of COVID-19, like lung scarring and heart damage.
So 200 million. Let's bring it back. Let's wield it back, just to make sure. Joe, you said what was that? 200 million people will have died from COVID-19. Once you're done with this, is that correct?
Probably by the time I finish this talk, beyond what they should be. It's estimated that 200 million people have died, probably by the time I finish this talk.
That's the guy. He can't even read off a teleprompter. That's the world we live in. I don't want to get behind Trump, but my God, Trump, I'm glad you responded to Gates. I'm glad you pointed out that this is going to be the new talking point. Great. Get the gloves off. Go full Burmis on him. Burmis Brigade, thumbs this video up, subscribe, share the info. Remember, without you guys, I couldn't do this. $5, $10, $15, it means the world to me. Down below. By the way, we also have the Dan Dix Press for Truth Faraday cage link there for the pre-orders. I'm going to try to get Dan on again this week about another subject so we can also talk about that. Check out the documentary films. For now, they're all in the playlist section while we still have a channel. I don't know. That's pretty harmful content. I got a little wild in there because just the things that are said are over the top. How am I supposed to not respond to that? So, listen, don't just share this stuff on social media. Find a video and then DM it to somebody and tell them why they need to watch it. Bring somebody in that way. If they do kick me off, remember, Rockfin's the place to be. Go to rockfin.com. Go create a free account, and then tomorrow watch me live at noon with my weekly Rockfin exclusive. Thank you so much for joining me. I got Lynn Ulbricht, all right, Ross Ulbricht's mother, coming up at 2 p.m. Eastern, and we're going to talk everything about the deep web, about her son, Dread Pirate Roberts, and really how he got railroaded as well. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then even later this evening, I'll be doing a broadcast with both Jeffrey Wilson and Pat Miletich with some of the most underreported stories that have been out there that you're not hearing enough about. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. I love you, and I'll see you on the flip side.